Right, the last 3 days, as we told you, have put the Kenyan police firmly on the spot amid claims of excessive use of force and questions on the respect for right to assembly. But there are also counter voices raising concerns about hooliganism and unrest disguised as political mobilization. So how do we strike the balance between rights and the common good? We speak to Kenya National Commission on Human Rights Chair Kagwiria Mbogori. Thank you so much for making time for us tonight. Delano, Kiilu, Longwe is a security expert, also the Secretary General for Protective and Safety Association of Kenya. Thank you for making time for us tonight. And lawyer and NASA strategist Joseph Simekha. Thanks for making time for us tonight. The National Police Service declined to send a representative for this discussion. In the meantime, talk to us. The hashtag is Sunday Live and text us on 22422. Very quickly, I'll take a look at your feedback on Twitter. Daisy Ogoni says, right is good so long as it does not infringe on the other person's freedom. If it does, it ceases to be a right, but a crime or offense. Badman says, you can no longer see or identify yourself solely as a member of a tribe, but as a citizen of a nation. One people working forward, working towards a common purpose. Nehemiah Rotich says, police should exercise a lot of restraint. We are operating in a fragile environment. There is a huge populace which is hurt, and says, or calls for peace. El Ngetich says, it is indeed high time that our constitution be followed and respected by us all. We have a duty of making a better Kenya. No one will do it for us. Right, and on 22422, very quickly, I'll take a look at a few messages here. Moses from Spring Valley says, the line between democracy and lawlessness has become too thin to be seen with naked eyes. The lawmakers must redraw that line afresh. I don't know how much our guests agree to that or not. And Marianne says, just who is inciting Kenyans into violence and destruction of properties? Why should innocent Kenyans suffer death and loss of property resulting from incitement? Keep talking to us. As I said, the hashtag is Sunday Live on Twitter and text us to 22422. And now that the National Police Service did not send a representative, we don't know how far. I wish they did. They have gone on with investigations as to what happened today. But I don't know what you make first of what happened today. I'll start with you, Kagwiria.
Okay, thank you very much. I must say that for us as well, we have our monitors on the ground and we do not have yet concrete figures, and I cannot comment in terms of the actual goings on because our reports are not yet completely in. But we decided, or I decided to come for this particular session because I feel that there are things to be said about the human rights perspective in terms of what we are seeing happening. What we have witnessed, especially as we wait and with the tension of waiting for the Supreme Court decision. And I think that's probably also some of the factors that are exacerbating the violence in the country. I will come to all that shortly. What do you make of what you saw today, and what has been said today, actually?
What we saw today, I think, in a nutshell, Hussein, communication is becoming a challenge in this country. And I think what we are seeing is that the fabric is beginning to fray. We have gone into a very protracted pre-election campaign period, and following the August 8th general elections, a very long session into the Supreme Court hearings in which the August 8th elections was overturned, and then another campaign and other demonstrations that have really worn out Kenyans. And right now, anything that you do or say is said in an environment which is highly we can call it very tense. Let's just put it in simple words, very, very tense. And a lot of the tension you see, anything you do today is associated in one way or another politically, even though it may not be. Why do I say it may not be? Because for those who have had an opportunity to live in the low-cost living areas within Nairobi, we tend to see now from a security perspective quite a number of these type of scenarios where there are a lot of unlicensed firearms. Now, I was having a discussion a bit earlier on with one of the members of the board of the Firearms Licensing Board, and there are on average about 2,000 unlicensed firearms unlicensed firearms. About 1,000 of these firearms have been retrieved, but the assumption, because of this political environment currently, is that anything that is a gunshot is actually ringing out from a police.
So
I would want to be very objective. I would want to be very objective in terms of looking at what happened in the morning. Today, from our perspective, what we're saying is matters are still under investigation. I think it's too early. I think it's very, very early for us to start saying so-so did this and so-so did that. And a lot of the incidents which are popping up very suddenly and aggravating quite a lot of reaction from the general public, we find that all of a sudden it's as though we are bereft of technology, Hussein.
So is timing an issue?
The timing.
That you're saying all of a sudden is timing an issue?
It's not an issue. It's the fact that technology doesn't seem to exist anymore in Kenya when these incidents occur. You know, on every other incident, we have very much clear use of technology and lots of data available. We have a lot of information available. But some of the incidents that have been occurring recently, we find them bereft of data. Okay,
we've already seen NASA leader Raila Odinga blaming the government for what happened, saying these were police-executed killings. You're an NASA strategist, Simekha. First, what do you make of what you saw? And do you share with those comments by Raila Odinga?
Yeah, what has happened is extremely unfortunate, and for me is a gross manifestation of the failure of governance in this country, and made worse by the failure of policing. Because regardless of whoever is committing those crimes, and they are crimes and extreme violations of human rights, the state has the responsibility, particularly foremost as represented by government and its security services, to protect our lives and our property, to secure our lives and property. We cannot, each one of us, depend on ourselves to do it. It would be lawlessness, it would be the jungle. That's why we've handed over part of our sovereignty to them, and we actually pay them to ensure that this happens. And policing ought to be, as insinuated, I think, by my colleague to the left just now, policing ought to be based on intelligence and evidence, that surely in this day and age there should be some indication to the police that all is not well. And therefore they like to say that security is very tight, they've upped security and so on. Is this really a failure of intelligence, or is it a deliberate thing that they are doing to keep away from those scenes where these things are happening, where these murderous acts are going on, and only to come when they have already happened? That's why overall, before even objective investigations are carried out to establish and put specific crimes with specific responsibility to individuals or groups, we have to condemn the failure of the state, because the state has generally failed Kenyans, failed us, all of us as Kenya, not just the people who have died, not just the families who have lost their loved ones, but the entire country. The state is failing us.
So it's ultimately still investigations have to go on. And I remember I also heard Raila Odinga say that again today, but is it right for him to again say this is police-style executions or government-related?
There's a lot of...
You're the one who's saying now that objective investigations have to be carried out ultimately.
Precisely, but understand the environment and context in which we are just now. I've said primary responsibility lies with the government. Then we've seen a pattern in the country. We've seen a pattern, we saw it on Friday. So when political leaders make those kinds of statements, they are based on what has been observed, that this looks like what we've seen before. Yes, I stand by what I've just said, that we expect, though I'm very reluctant to believe that any objective investigations will happen, except by organizations like the chair ladies here, Kenya National Commission on Human Rights. But by police, I am, again, based on experience.
Delano, do you think I'm
extremely reluctant to,
do you agree with what he's saying?
Trust.
I think Hussein, we have to stop speculation. We must stop speculation.
Absolutely.
You know, when it comes to human life and the sanctity of human life and human limb, we don't play around with these things. And again, I think we were too fast today morning to come out and say, this is the police. I watched the people who were interviewed initially. None of them were eyewitnesses. Some of them were third party, and the broken telephone comes into play, and everybody simply assumes that these were policemen. So even just to put the whole blame on the National Police Service, I think we are doing ourselves a disservice by speculating about an incident that has occurred, and then blaming it on some particular political, delineation in terms of how that has occurred. First of all, here we have a scenario where, unfortunately, we've lost Kenyan lives. I think it's very important that we come to a complete end of this particularly protracted process, because right now we're seeing a lot of tension out there. But we also know for a fact that there has been a huge economic impact. When there is a huge economic impact, Hussein, you know what happens? Crime spikes automatically. People lack resources, and when people lack resources, they begin to look at what next. The other thing I'd just like to point out, Hussein, here is that every single thing that you're seeing has been planned. So my colleague Simekha, yes, my colleague Simekha just mentioned, you know, there was this incident that occurred on Friday. Friday there was a plan, you know, in terms of what was happening to have a procession. There was also a plan from the police service to see how to manage that procession. Everything that you see is always planned. If somebody decides that, you know, something is going to occur on a particular day, somebody is behind the planning. Now, from the police service and from the security agencies, what's very important now is that investigation must find out who was planning what and from where. We cannot say this particular person killed somebody. If I look back into the activities of this morning, we do not have a uniformed police officer with a service number identified as part of any of those activities that occurred today morning.
He's talking of a pattern. I don't know what you mean when you say a pattern.
We saw this from, I mean, it's happened many times before in this country. We have a history of extrajudicial killings by the police. They have been inducted by our National Commission on Human Rights and many other human rights organizations. We've seen the most recent being the post-August 8 elections and a bit into the 26th elections, where police even captured on camera executing people, you know, extrajudicial killings. So when I say there's a pattern, that's what I mean, that it's a pattern. I have not squarely laid blame on the police and said that I have evidence that it's the police who have killed these people. But what I'm saying that when you hear political leaders speak and blame the police, first based on a pattern, but secondly, and perhaps most important, based on the expectation that it is them who we now have the responsibility to secure our lives. It's them who have failed us. Whichever way you look at it, regardless of who is responsible, the ultimate blame must go to the people whom we pay and entrust with the responsibility to protect our lives.
Thank you very much. I finally get to say something. I must join my voice with my fellow panelists here and say that let's not lose sight of the fact that we have lost too many lives this year, and we are likely to lose more lives if nothing is done. I think the main question for all of us as Kenyans is to ask, how do we secure lives going forward? How do we stop this ongoing terror? Right now, as I waited to come to sit here, I've gotten information that certain parts of this city are no-go areas right now. In fact, even our monitors on the ground, their lives are threatened, which means even our work is being inhibited. And we are an independent body, and we don't want to rely on social media reports or other reports. We want everything we say to the members of the public as a national organization is something we have verified and confirmed, because we don't want to rely on any rumors. I think Mr. Simekha is saying that the police have failed us. I will also say even the political class has failed us. Because when it becomes a blame game, then you tell people who are already angry and hungry. Because, as he says, when business is at a standstill, no money is changing hands. Our economy is suffering. People don't have money. People are unable to put food on their table. People are getting angrier and angrier, and less patient, and we will see a lot of angry actions. I think in the last couple of days we've seen a lot of properties and vehicles burned and looted and destroyed. To what purpose? To what purpose?
And now that you're talking about people blaming each other, let's go back to Friday. Again, both sides are blaming each other for the problems that ensued on Friday for all of you. But I'll start with you again, Kagwiria. How would you describe what happened on Friday? Do you think the police handled right? Did they handle the situation the right way on Friday?
Let me first of all say that I think that it could have been handled better. Because I think that it was something that was already anticipated. So I think there's a sense in which I felt that it could have been handled better.
What do you mean when you say it could have been handled better?
Yes, because I think that there was too much use of force. But on the other hand, I must also say that I'm beginning to question myself, even as a human rights defender and human rights activist in this country, whether it is possible in this country at this time to have peaceful political protests. And I'm asking this very sincerely. And those who have answers to this can maybe tell me whether it is possible for us at this time, with the kind of anger and incitement and the polarization that we have in this country, whether it is possible for us to have peaceful political protests. And also the kind of I would even say incitement even against the police, and also some of the incidents about involving excessive force and use of firearms by policemen in quelling riots and civil unrest. The lack of trust is also reached a certain crescendo, and that is why I'm wondering whether we are capable now of having peaceful political protests. And why I'm saying that also before my friend takes it on is the fact that in this country, I must inform members of the public and Kenyans at large that we only have one body mandated to cater with the public order and law and order. There's only one body mandated to deal with that, and that is the National Police Service. So whatever we do and however we castigate them and whatever bad things we say about them, when problems break out in Kawangware, we need the police to go to Kawangware and save lives and protect citizens. Whether it is Babadogo or Mathare or Lakisama and other places in Ruaraka, we still need.
When they say they're not giving green light to NASA to go on with their procession or protests again, they need to be heard? Because NASA again say this is an inherent right drawn from the Constitution.
I think the problem is that we are having too much white noise. We have too much noise. There's need to actually listen to each other. Because I think the ultimate goal must be to really safeguard lives in this country. Because losing a single life is disastrous. Losing so many lives in such horrendous circumstances is mind-boggling, and that is why there's so much, I think there's so much anger out there.
Joseph Simekha and team, I mean, believe, and as I was telling you, that this is your inherent right to hold protests. You don't need to get permission from anybody. How do you respond to what you saw on Friday? It
absolutely is a right, and just in anticipation of perhaps anything that may be said against that, rights can be limited, but only by written law. Rights can be limited. Rights are not given to us by government, not by the police. They are inherent, and they can be limited, of course, but only by written law, not by edict, not by fiat, not by pronouncements.
Regardless of what they may know in terms of security, or if there could be security problems.
We've had this constitution for a very long time, since 2010. I do not understand what has stopped the minister responsible from instituting a process based on the experience we've had so far of crafting regulations for limiting certain rights, including the rights to protest and so on and so forth, which then would be subjected to public participation, etc., etc. And then we have something predictable upon which, when police make decisions, we know where they are deriving that. Secondly, for me, it's completely unacceptable to make any attempt to criminalize legitimate political activity. That one we will never accept. You are asking...
By that you mean the protests or demonstrations?
Protests and other legitimate, lawful...
Okay, let's talk about those protests, Simekha. And as she pointed out, and I was going to ask you anyway, there was destruction of property we saw. There was looting that day. Nobody has talked about it, especially from the organizers of that protest.
No,
she's actually saying she does not believe, or she does not think there's anything like peaceful political demonstrations anymore?
I want to answer that. I want to very directly respond to that. That is, for me, a fallacy. We have not reached anywhere in this country where you can say that we cannot have peaceful political protests or political processions or rallies. Then you'd be saying we really are a failed state. Because we have police with the responsibility of ensuring that those who engage in not just political activity, any lawful activity, but especially that which is public, are protected. That which involves a lot of people are protected for as long as they have followed procedure, which NASA did, brought to the police, and they did not object. Until last minute, you could almost think that there was a knee-jerk. It's like they had forgotten and they remembered, hold on a minute, we have to ban this rally.
So who takes responsibility, Simekha?
Sorry?
If you have thousands of people demonstrating, and we've seen in some demonstrations in this country before, if you have thousands of people demonstrating and among them there's looting and there's destruction of property, who takes responsibility for that?
First of all, we all the time when we plan processions, we have marshals. People who, because we know that any place where there's a crowd, you expect those kind of things to happen. So people are briefed, marshals are briefed, ensure that the people who come to our processions do not engage in any criminal activity. However, we do not have the power and the means to totally secure those demonstrations. The people who have those responsibilities and the means are the police. We expected them, because we had notified them, to line up on, and we provided that we will follow this route and that route and that route, to be along the route in uniform, in plain cloth, and to be amongst us, to ensure that anybody who engages in criminal activity, with the help of our marshals, on their own, police on their own, are able to pick up these persons. We saw on television screens that a lot of looting and hooliganism was happening behind the NASA procession, after it has already gone by. Because a lot of the people who were in the NASA procession were coming under very heavy attack from the police. Surely, when would they have looted? But indeed, there was looting happening, coming behind the procession. And this one, I cannot defend any looter, regardless of whether he or she is from NASA or Jubilee or any party. I cannot defend that.
Delano.
Hussein, I think, first of all, for all Kenyans out there, we, as Protective and Safety Association of Kenya, urge you to remain very calm and to be very patient with the process we go through as a nation, because we are now walking through what we call uncharted waters in terms of what we're experiencing as a nation. But we urge you to not only remain calm, but also to take care of your neighbor. That person will be with you for many years. Their children will be with you. I think, Hussein, from the perspective of what happened on Friday, it was quite clear, and in this particular case, I must be very, very objective, that this was not properly planned. And I thank Simekha for actually being very open about it. They didn't have enough resources. He's already shared with us. And certainly from the National Police Service, there was inadequate provision of resources to manage the...
Even for the police themselves?
From the police service, yes. There was inadequate provision of resources to handle the kind of activity that was due to take place, not only from a human resource perspective, but also from an equipment perspective. If we look at developed countries and the developed world and the type of what we can call peaceful demonstrations from a NASA side and what other people saw as particularly different, we see different uses of very discrete, non-lethal technology that is always utilized. But the one factor that we have quite clearly coming out from Friday is that there was no person that was killed by a bullet from any police firearm. Again, if we look at today morning's incident...
That has not been established.
At this juncture...
Up to now, it hasn't been established. They said they will investigate. Police denied. There have been claims and counterclaims about it, but it hasn't been established yet.
From our perspective, and we sit with the professional community of security as an association, we hear and we receive reports about people being stoned and very many other activities on Friday. That confrontation did not need to occur. If there was proper communication, number one, which of course he has shared that there was not proper communication. Number two...
No, that is wrong. I cannot let you continue saying that, attributing those things to me. I have not said that at all, that there was no proper communication. I have also heard you say that I've said that we didn't have enough resources.
You didn't have enough marshals.
No, I didn't say that. You are just now here pushing the police narrative.
You said...
Listen, I said, and in fact, no political party in the world can have the resources to take primary responsibility for public order, for security. That is the work of the police. We share responsibility because it's our procession. Then we have marshals to ensure that they work with the police to ensure that we share responsibility to secure that procession. But the primary responsibility can never lay with any political party in the world or political coalition. It is the police. So that is erroneous. You should not push those allegations.
I think, Simekha, what we are saying here, in the developed world, is very simple. Any party that wants to either picket or demonstrate is responsible for the people that it calls together to picket or to demonstrate. And they're responsible to train the people, to communicate with the people, how to demonstrate, how not to interfere with other activities. That is common across the developed world. We have a challenge from another perspective, Hussein, in terms of what occurred on Friday. On Friday, not only was there not clear communication in terms of what the police communicated to the people who are assembled, but also there was no clear avenue that was made in terms of evacuation. Because here, you've got people coming from one direction, which is the airport, and they're heading in this particular direction. Even if you want to disperse people, we have to do these things in an organized manner. And we have to do this with the consideration of life and limb. Okay. Because those individuals who are in there, correctly speaking, are important to this nation.
Finally then, for the three of you, finally, and very briefly, the question we're asking tonight, how do we strike the ideal balance between the rights and common good in this country then, going forward, with all the hate that is in this country right now? Very briefly.
Thank you very much. I think it behoves on all of us citizens of this country to behave responsibilities and as individuals going forward. I think one of my fellow panelists here has said that it's so important for us as Kenyans to not only mind yourself and what you do, but also mind your neighbor, because that is going to be your neighbor for long. And I think that is the right attitude. Right now, there are reports of people being pulled out of cars along Thika Road. Whether that is, again,
that has been cleared.
Social media hype.
No, that has been cleared.
That has been cleared. But when people read that and they have to use that road to go home, the terror strikes them. When you read about mayhem happening in Umoja and other areas of Nairobi, and you have relatives who are living there, it strikes terror in you, and that is exactly the right that we are dealing with. The right to security is the right to feel that you are safe and those you care about are safe.
Also safe.
So I think it is so important that we all make it now our business. That it is not, we cannot just push it out there and say we start with ourselves first and foremost. But having said that, really, and I think we have said that as the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights ad nauseum now, I think it is so important that our national police really exercise restraint and avoid the use of excessive force, because demos and protests are going to continue, and I think it is so important, especially for our commission, that lives are safeguarded, because the sanctity of life cannot be measured.
Okay, briefly, Simekha.
First of all, Hussein, I have to tell you that in my understanding, you cannot say that you want to balance between human rights and the common good. Those two things are not mutually exclusive. In fact, securing the foundation for securing the common good is human rights, respect for human rights. Those two things support each other. You cannot talk about enjoying securing the common good and leave rights out of it.
Of course, this is after police were on the spot amid claims of excessive use of force and questions over the right to assembly. There's a context to this. That's why
you know, it's always, and I think it ought to be condemned when especially the police and some politicians, even cabinet secretaries, when they tend to suggest that the work that the police do and human rights are necessarily mutually exclusive. Those two things are not. They actually ought to support each other. We must see those together. Public order, law and order, security has to be, the foundation has to be the protection and promotion of human rights. That's why the work of the police is to secure our lives, our property, and generally law and order. So we must not separate those two things and as if they are competing. Going forward, people who we have entrusted with public duty, they bear a much higher responsibility than any other Kenyan. Yes, it starts with everybody, and we all share some responsibility as Kenyans, brothers and sisters, but people who are entrusted with public duty, who hold office in trust on behalf of the rest of us, they have the highest responsibility to the country. So police cannot be competing with ordinary civilians and citizens, for example, in throwing stones at each other. Who now is the responsible party? Okay. We ought to see that public officers do their work. Finally, it is the police who started this thing I've just heard here that people are stoned. And then again, you've just said, the same police have said they're carrying out investigations. So how did they know that people were stoned? Again, that's a failure of responsibility, even in terms of what they communicate. The best would have been to say, well, let us investigate and establish how these people died, under what circumstances, and who is responsible.
Couldn't we say the same about today's, the killings today? Because that's what I was
precisely, and you've just heard me say, police must not compete with politicians and ordinary citizens in making all manner of statements.
But should politicians also be stopped from making such statements?
Absolutely, two wrongs don't make a right. Okay. I'm just laying emphasis on the fact that people who are in public office entrusted to bear arms on our behalf, they bear a very high responsibility. If I fail, they must not compare themselves to me and also fail because Simekha has failed.
Okay, Delano, very briefly, finally.
I think we have 45 million Kenyans that we're looking at, and the bulk majority, over 50%, are really below the age of 20. We have a very young country. We have a very young developing nation. The impressions that our leaders, political and otherwise, are making in this season are going to have a cross-generational impact. In trying to seek a balance between human rights and the common good, when we analyze this, it has to be with a cross-generational thought pattern. It is not about here we have this particular activity that we must accomplish without taking in consideration the fact that we may be searing the minds of Kenyans, young Kenyans, for the near future or for the foreseeable future. In terms of just looking at this, I would very much hesitate to condemn the National Police Service in terms of any of these activities. I think even when we analyze the activities this afternoon, because there was a lot of demonstrations again this afternoon on Babadogo Road, you even carried a live feed on your news tonight, and people were holding up the cartridges. You'll notice that the cartridges are crimped at the top. A ballistics expert has just explained to us that those are blanks. Police have been using blanks. So when we go through the investigations, I'm very confident that we do have a National Police Service that cares. This is not the former...
So you're finding no fault at the police? That's what
I'm finding
no
in this afternoon's activities, by firing blanks, not firing live rounds of ammunition.
The same activities that you actually just moments ago said should be investigated.
I said Friday. I'm talking about this afternoon, Babadogo Road. There's investigations being carried out at all levels. I'm saying here we are trying to vilify and condemn the National Police Service, which you've just heard from our colleague over here, that this is the only service that is left to deal with any domestic incident. In fact, you'll find that across the country, if there's any incident, whether in a small village or in a large city, the first person you're going to call upon is who?
Police.
The police.
But she's also talked about excessive use of force by
exactly.
police.
What we recommend as well as Protective and Safety Association of Kenya is that we should go back, equip our police with non-lethal weapons to deal with civil disobedience where demonstrators choose to step out of their mandate of demonstration and picketing and go into what we call civil disobedience. Right. So for crowd control, we should equip them. We should invest into that process of proper equipment for the police, because right now we're leaving people who are ill-equipped and perhaps not trained specifically on civil disobedience on how to handle it. That's why we're ending up with this, and it will not stop unless we actually, it's like taking somebody and you say, this person, we have not provided the proper education, but you want to give them this particular piece of equipment.
All right. Right.
So we have to very simply, there is a growth track that is required for the National Police Service. There is also some level and semblance of order which needs to come into the whole political process, and our political leaders need to speak very peacefully into this particular situation.
Right. That is Delano Kiilu Longwe, the Secretary General of Protective and Safety Association of Kenya, also security expert. NASA strategist Joseph Simekha, also a lawyer, and Kagwiria Mbogori is the chair lady of the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights. Thank you so much for making time for us tonight. Very briefly, I'll take a look at your tweets again as we wind up a sample. We have Saddam Kibet. It's time to do thorough clean up to finish all vigilante groups. It's no use claiming we are safe with such crooks around. Kevin Sadi says, if the police who are sworn to protect human lives are the ones killing innocent souls, where are we heading to? And Bokombe says, the respect of holding of rights is enough for the common good. The rights violations, either social, political, or economic, will make the situation worse. Well, thank you so much for your feedback and for watching Sunday Live tonight. I'm Hussein Mohammed. Have a good night.